3, 2, 1. Da 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 da. Hi, Euclidean Vision here. Welcome to part 3.2, or something of the like, on this series on how to fix the Overwatch lore. This section of the series looking at Overwatch as an organisation as a whole and sort of what it means to the story. This episode in particular looking at important locations and groups and how they relate back to the central organisation, the central characters, and what sort of plot threads it presents for us to move the story forward overall. So, first off, there's obviously Overwatch HQ, Watchpoint Gibraltar. I believe that makes the most sense for them to sort of regroup at, or for the location of recall to occur. That would make tons of sense to me. It's obviously not the only way it could occur, but do we have another central location for anything like a recall meeting to occur at? Don't think so. Are there other watch points? There's a Grand Mesa that Soldier 76 stole his pulse rifle from, and there's one in maybe like northern Russia that the practice range is at, but neither of them seem to have any genuine story importance with comparison to something like Watchpoint Gibraltar. There's also, and this is quite important, especially as one of our very few confirmed members would hold this in like high importance, the eco points, especially like Eco Point Antarctica and its atmospheric anomaly. May is obviously going to care really strongly about that. I think that's probably her most going to be her most clear goal going forward, is to look into that. So that presents another thing that Overwatch are in some aspect going to have to deal with and investigate. Finally, in terms of notable locations linked to Overwatch, is the old Swiss HQ. There's probably not much left of it. It could just still be a pile of rubble, or there could be an entirely new building there by this point, and I can't see anyone really visiting it, especially like the reformed Overwatch, for any reason beyond sort of like sentimental reasons to maybe mourn the death of Jack Morrison, in massive bunny quotes. So there's not too much to see from that location, but it always could hold something for the new Overwatch to investigate. They also have to look into not just protecting themselves and their home. They also have to like look into protecting their own, as a lot of ex-Overwatch agents very well could be at risk based on Reaper's attempts at Watchpoint Gibraltar. So they're going to have to be looking worldwide at their own members, their own ex-members, which we'll maybe discuss one or two of those a bit more specifically shortly. So where are these threats coming from? And especially what is like directly affecting those ex-Overwatch members? Talon. What do we know about Talon? Where do we know that they have strongholds? We definitely know Rialto, or at least someone like McCree will know that Rialto is possibly he knows full on that it's Talon HQ, which gives us a sort of striking point or a place to investigate at least. There's also Maximilian's Casino in Monaco. So there are a few sort of geographical locations that a reformed Overwatch can go examine in order to figure out what is going on with the world, or at least learn something, or at least put Talon off the tail, act in some way against Talon. We also don't know if they'll have made the Sombra connection, and the Sombra connection, as we saw with Zarya's searching comic, could just go full on, where on earth is Carmen Sandiego? And that could just take us anywhere, which, again, as that's a possibility for the ex-Overwatch agents, there's plenty of room to play with that as to where it sends us. We obviously could see more looking into the Los Muertos gang, so places like Dorado and Castillo and the Calaveras bar? Calaveras? So there's plenty of locations that can be looked into. How immediately important that is, though, will depend theoretically on what is to come. How important Sombra is over Talon, and whether they make the connection, whether she's part of them or not, is nebulous at this point. So let's go into another biggie, not just Talon. We've obviously got the looming Omnic crisis. The main sort of front of that is occurring in Russia from the Siberian Omnium. There's also Volskaya Industries' involvement in that military action, and her dealings with supposedly the enemy, supposedly the Omnics that she's fighting, but that is still unclear. So another plot thread that we have no genuine conclusion to. It's obviously enough reason for her to go along with Sombra, well, initially, until she said Zarya afterwards. So she didn't comply with Sombra for very long. So that's obviously there to be developed as well. How much Overwatch will know about that, or how relevant it will be to them, again, is nebulous. If they were aware that it was a Talon attempt, they could well use Volskaya as a place to get information just about Talon as a whole. So if we're looking again for more of the Omnic side of things, there's definitely the UK at present. Supposedly tensions have been rising at King's Row again, especially after the assassination of Mondata. So calming a sort of further uprising at King's Row could be in order at some point. It's obviously a very important place to trace her, and especially as we know that her girlfriend lives there as well. There's plenty of character opportunity for conflict there as well. We could look at something like the corporations then, so like Lamarico in Dorado again, how important they are now. They were sort of used to hype the Sombra release as far as I'm aware, so there might not be much going on there anymore. Vishkar definitely has loads of potential to do things in the world. They're one of seemingly Talon's main fingers in the pie of sort of a controlling world order, if you will, that making a hyper prevalent super corporation like Vishkar involved in like the infrastructure of the world that's kind of dangerous. And it's obviously a very lucrative business for Talon in its ways, in more ways than just finance. So that could lead us to Rio to meet Symmetra and Lucio. It could lead us to somewhere like Utopia or Hyderabad to see sort of more Vishkar headquarters, or there could be plenty of other locations around the world. But obviously that could bring us into contact with some other characters. Horizon Lunar Colony, the trailer for the Horizon map, I think Winston suggests he may have to go back there at some point, or we may have to go back there at some point, which creates more interesting possibilities going forward. How important it is, again, unsure, but that's obviously going to also bring us into contact with Liu Cheng Interstellar, which could send us to China, etc. There's Helix Security, like how involved exactly they'd be or how prevalent they'd be. We know that they've got presences in both Egypt and Numbani. Egypt supposedly guarding the God program, and Numbani they've got a prison complex. If I remember, it's actually in Numbani. I hope it is. That's where Doomfist broke out of, I thought. So, especially as far as involved with Helix Security, and they're involved with some of the more high-end potential things like God programs, and having housed someone like Doomfist, there's potential for them to be involved. Somehow they're again another sort of maybe like a super corporation that's involved in security, and as Helix Security have been seemingly targeted, it could be something that Overwatch wants to look into as well, like, oh, why is this other security company being targeted by attacks from certain angles, etc, etc. I'm looking at my list, and the last sort of corporation is actually really interesting. The Omnica Corporation and the Omniums, like investigating those, learning more about what exactly the Omnics are. I have my theory on what Omniums are, and therefore as to what Omnics are as well, but we'll discuss that in the Talon video. But there's plenty of places that this could send us. Again, this is me sort of trying to just create little story arcs and help progress information, knowledge, and like character progression as we go along as well, sending our characters to these places to interact with certain elements of the world, and beliefs that they've had could give us some really interesting like character conflict going on. So that could send us to Siberia, to the Omnic Crisis 2. There's one in Nigeria that apparently made the OR-14 Adenas initially. The one in South China Sea that's making the Guishin that Mecha are dealing with, but that definitely gives us there's a really nice opportunity for Overwatch to get involved there, with some very obvious links, like Mecha are very public about what they do. D.Va is a huge public face. There's possible links there. I don't want D.Va to join Overwatch, because I hate Shooting Star. I hate the new D.Va. I hate Hannah Song. I mean, I don't hate Hannah Song. She's a cinnamon roll. Great. She's putting up with a lot of shit that she shouldn't have to be. But it's... But yes, there's obviously huge potential for story going forward if we are to involve Overwatch with Mecha and the Omnium in the South China Sea. There's also the defunct one in Australia and the defunct one in Detroit. The Detroit one we know about through like a news article and like a clip from First Strike, which obviously wasn't even released. but we can safely assume that it exists. So there's another, there's some more Omniums that we can go to if we are seeking knowledge about Omnics and Omniums, etc., especially how important the new Overwatch might consider that going forward. Looking at something like that, actually, there's also SST Laboratories, the ones who made the Bastion units originally, how connected they are to the original Omnic Crisis, and any sort of Omnic purpose that was connected to that is questionable and might be an avenue forward, especially if Bastion is one of the initial recall members, which obviously I'm only positing as like a possibility. But that can also lead us to the Ironclad Guild. There's plenty to explore with Torbjorn and the Omnics through them as well. That can also maybe gift us some new original characters, even though another Ironclad member would be a bit much at this point. But it's again just a possibility going forward. But then thinking of a place that is maybe a bit more likely to give us some more original characters, Junkertown. It's very uninvolved from most of the rest of the world. The Junkers themselves are probably the strongest candidate for presenting a much more like unrelated conflict into the world. And as I've mentioned before, they're probably the closest to being the next actual faction in world compared to any other group. And there's potentially loads to see from there. Again, whether Overwatch will be particularly interested in Junkertown, I think would fall more clearly if they were to act in some way, like some kind of Omnic purge or something of the like that draws attention to Junkertown, rather than just, oh, it exists, the Junkers are there, do we as Overwatch go see them? Do we need to? Not really. They're not presenting any relevant conflict that involves us. Okay, leave them to it. That's that's as far as that seems like logical at this point, but there's definitely plenty to come out of Junkertown because they're so non-standard, if you will, compared to most of the rest of the Overwatch groups and factions, etc. They're an interesting one. So Junkertown, not the most likely place to go, especially not to see any Omnics. But I think if we do get to go there through Overwatch, we can see some really interesting stuff. We could also see some really interesting stuff in Junkertown, regardless of Overwatch, or even through the eyes of an Omnic. An Omnic visiting Australia and going to Junkertown, yeah, you know where I'm going with this. Zenyatta totally going to Junkertown to be like,
I wish to understand your point of view.
And, oh boy. So, there you go, that's something that doesn't involve Overwatch at all. Theoretically, it could obviously build into Overwatch or Talon, yada yada. But there's a further interesting storyline that gets to develop Junkrat, Roadhog, the Queen, Zenyatta, in a way we probably may not have thought of expanding on Zenyatta's story. So, again, while these locations, how important any of them will be going forward, is up for debate, it's also up for debate sort of where and how they'll be important, and I think that Junkertown and the Junkers offers some huge opportunities to go forward on all sides of things. Human, Omnic, Organisation, no matter where you stand on something, Junkertown is going to have some interest for you. Another place that's kind of notable for central characters within the narrative that I've brought up a few times already is Numbani. We've already had at least we had two characters from Numbani, Orisa and Doomfist, but there's also several side characters in the lore, like Ify, who's like a famous scientist in the world, and obviously a bit too young to join Overwatch, but she could be very useful in the story, and everybody's favourite, or at least my favourite, Link 17, who I really want to see more from. Numbani is obviously a window into seeing more of these characters and maybe bringing them into the story and maybe the game wholesale, but that's not sort of the most pressing reason we'd go there. As I've mentioned, Overwatch would be much more likely to go there to investigate either the old Omnium or to investigate Helix Security with either their problems with Doomfist or any of their other things with the Temple of Anubis. We don't know where Helix Security's base is, I don't think, or where their
headquarters is. So if that's in Numbani, we go there. If it's at the Temple of Anubis, we'll go there to see them. That'll depend, obviously, going forward, as seems to be a massive pattern with this video so far. But Numbani obviously offers loads of opportunities for like a variety of characters. As I've obviously mentioned, like we've got child scientist and gender fluid, super sassy Omnic hacker, quadruped, like improved AI descendant of a group of particular Omnics who fought the leader of Talon at one point, etc., 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 etc. We've already got plenty of interesting characters there, so again, maybe it wouldn't be worth having more, because that'll feel like a bit much, but it's obviously sort of a hotbed of activity, and it welcomes all kinds, humans, Omnics, cyborgs, anything in between those, if there is anything. The sentient animal life, I imagine, would be welcome in Numbani as well, so there's plenty of opportunity to gain more of the experimental characters in the universe from somewhere like Numbani again, especially, I think, in terms of Omnics. I think it would be really interesting.
Speaking of Omnics, actually, there's a totally different place concerned with Omnics that would be far more, I think, far nicer to visit. Nepal. It'd be really nice to see something from Zenyatta. It would be nice for... there's definitely ways for the cast already, as the way they are lined up, for us to interact with Zenyatta or someone from Nepal. May was noted to have been in Nepal at some point within the present, which could randomly see her meeting with them. There's obviously the connections that Zenyatta and Genji have to the place, whether either of them are there at present. Even Zenyatta is supposedly travelling the world. It is obviously questionable. But that's obviously a place to explore, especially if you want to learn more about the Iris or about the Omnics just in general. There's obviously the Temple of Anubis itself, as I mentioned back with Helix Security, but that is more associated to the other God programs, whether there are any other God programs, how important they are, whether they've been retconned out of relevance, or whether they're actually super important, whether they are linked to the statues that Talon have stolen or not, because there seems to be a pattern with the whole naming a God program after a God thing. I mean, Blizzard, deny that Athena's a God program all you want. Get fucked. She's a God program. Do you think with that, like, it's not going to change anything? It doesn't mean you have to explain anything any further, and it doesn't ruin the storyline if there is something that powerful in the universe. It creates opportunities for you to make stories in the universe with them, for fuck's sake. Don't make such obvious things and then be like, no, just to be like, oh, no, or to get you out of explaining something. Athena's a God program. It's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Jesus Christ, like. So, how important, again, how are the other God programs? How important will Athena herself be? I think only personally she would be confined to a story role rather than being made available in game, because that can present all sorts of complications. It could be pretty cool if she got the crazy tentacly avatar thing. That'd be great. How important the God programs are overall is something that can obviously be addressed as an avenue through her, or somewhere like the Temple of Anubis, where the very powerful God program, and called so because it's that powerful, Anubis resides. Obviously, Overwatch looking into this can send us to a bunch of places: Ayutthaya, Petra, Ilios, Chateau Guillard, the corporation that is part of the archaeological team that's investigating all of these places collectively. And then if that all links back to Talon, there's another statue in Rialto, so there's definitely something coming from that storyline, theoretically, with the amount of threads that we have building onto that provides tons of opportunities for mini story arcs for Overwatch to investigate, to move the story forward. Which then leads us to sort of the opposite of that. Someone like Eichenwald, I don't think we need to see much from Eichenwald now, especially as Eichenwald was almost used to propel Reinhardt and Brigitte's story forward into them, connecting back to Overwatch. The same with Hanamura, which again was more to facilitate Hanzo and Genji's storyline, we could obviously go back there if the Shimadas are important somehow. There are obviously further stories than just Overwatch and Talon, despite how central they are to the plot. So going back there, whether it's for Hanzo's sake, whether it's for Genji's sake, whether it's totally unconnected to either of those, is obviously, up in the air. But it is an avenue forward, but I feel it's one that's maybe less likely. As might be seeming a little evident by now, there are a few locations like this, more so like tie into a hero's history, backstory, but may not be anywhere near as valuable a sort of catalyst to move forward. So somewhere like Route 66 that is obviously linked to McCree. Are we going to see anything at Route 66? I don't think we've really seen anything actually happen there, so there is a possibility for something to happen. But what was the train wreck? Was it another Talon train heist thing? What are the Deadlock Gang? Will we ever see anything from there? If we do, maybe like seeing McCree's history with the Deadlock Gang and Reyes picking him up out of that. That's probably where we'd see it, if we're going to see it anywhere. So again, a bit more of a nebulous. That's my favourite word of these few videos. It says something about the Overwatch story, I guess, doesn't it? Somewhere like Route 66, I think there is possibly something to see, but I think it's not as likely to be something used to move us forward. I think it'll be something that's used to show us backwards. There's also one that's kind of a weird one. I really don't know what to think about this. Hollywood? Like, we have a single, notable character there in Halford Glitchbot. That he's of any actual note is questionable. There's the circumstances that Diva ended up in a film. What are those? I mean, doesn't that matter? Probably really doesn't. Is it there for any reason? Is there anything that we can use in Hollywood to move us forward? It doesn't seem so, as far as I'm aware. I mean, if there's anything massively glaring that I've just totally glossed over, as with anything in this video, please point that out to me, because if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But yeah, there's not much I can see from Hollywood, unless it's sort of a stop along the way, or a way to access a new character, or I don't think there'll be any events that occur there. I mean, we're gonna have Halford Glitchbot assassinated? I mean, we've spent more time with him than we have him on data, but I doubt anyone cares as much. As we get to places less connected to characters, or places that their connection to a character has been very thoroughly explored, the options going forward obviously still exist, but they become less, theoretically. As I said, there's obviously ways that these locations can be used. How much of a direct interest the new Overwatch will take in them, how important they will view anything that's happening there, if anything's happening at all, is up for debate. We don't know we don't know enough going forward. We've got a gazillion plot threads going on, but it often seems that the new plot progression that we get is just a new plot thread rather than any progression on an existing one. So maybe there is something to see from places like Hollywood. And one that's possibly the least likely place of importance, Blizzard World. I don't see anything really significant happening there, and unless you go super dark and talent bombs Blizzard World and kills a bunch of people. I don't know. That's one of the most nebulous sort of geographical locations in the game, really. That's quite a difficult one. The last place that I think could actually be of some genuine interest and that could develop in a bunch of ways that we haven't seen yet is Oasis. We know that it has connections to at least Moira, who's the Minister of Genetics at Oasis, on top of being one of the High Council members of Talon. And Symmetra has an Oasis skin. I don't know how connected to them she is. but I assume that there is at least some connection there. She's a famous architect, as they're known. So, as they're all supposedly quite highly respected people and scientists, oddities, etc., from Oasis, there could be at least further characters to see there, or definitely some more sort of exposition into the nature of some things in the world, like omnics or god programs, or the potentials of science in the world and what that can say going forward. And there's, Oasis is again a bit more of a nebulous field as to what it would give to the story, like what it's going to actually say going forward, what it does for us. But yeah, it's definitely an interesting location, at least, that we could see Overwatch approaching quite logically through, Winston has shown understanding that, like, oh, Oasis, a place run by scientists. That's fucking smart. I like it. With the slow reformation of Overwatch, would Winston seek out some advice from other people? For just like an instance of a reason that we could end up in a location like that. Possibly even before Overwatch actually gets recalled even. So there's plenty of room for how the story goes forward, using these locations as jumping off points and means to help us understand things further and create the leads that lead to the overall central conflict, etc., etc. Again, as with most of this, like, these locations their importance to modern Overwatch is yet to be determined, or indeterminable at this point, because we're not sure which of these avenues to go forward Blizzard is going to use to sort of drive the story onwards. I've mentioned several things that here so far that can affect both our characters and sort of like the organizations and the state of the world as it is. So there's a lot to consider on that front, which means that going forward is going to be like really easy because there's loads of avenues to explore, but which of these I've addressed, who knows which is the most immediate of a concern. There's obviously, as I mentioned, there's ex-Overwatch agents like Soldier 76, Anna, and then Gabriel Reyes and Amelie Lacroix, who are now with Talon, and everyone's relation to those people and their attitudes to their alignment, etc. There's loads to explore there. And then sort of a much later thing, like further recruitment, like whoever we get initially in sort of the recall version of Overwatch should give us some clues as to who potentially could end up joining based on what those characters could view as important and where therefore that sends us and who it forces us to interact with, which then, so that, yeah, there's loads of things here, but despite all of these things that they have to do, how are they going to do it? That is a question for next episode, in which I will discuss more so the methodology that Overwatch will have to engage in to do what it has to do or what it wants to do, and sort of the ideological conflicts that they'll have to have with themselves, that Overwatch will have to have with itself, in order to figure out exactly what it is and what it has to do. So, thank you for listening if you've stayed thus far. I've been Euclidean Vision. Subscribe to the channel if you like what I have to say. Always remember, when the iris embraces you, give it a cuddle back.